So our topic today is actually making LinkedIn work for you and your graduate degree. So obviously LinkedIn is just a tool, it does lots of things, it exists out there. It's not something that people have to use. It's not just for graduate students or undergraduates or professionals, but as a graduate student, there are things that you can begin to think about, a graduate student or a postdoc, there are things that you can begin to think about that are going to help you create a professional brand, a research brand, an academic brand, whatever flavor of brand you want, to make sure that your skills, experiences, and knowledge are really highlighted as you are making steps in your own career progression. Making LinkedIn work for you in your graduate degree then today is all about making sure that you understand how to use this and how to make sure that your brand aligns with some of your career goals that are out there. I am Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn's Career Services. So let's address then sort of this idea of why LinkedIn. And I put some first-gen considerations here too, since this is sort of our focus area of this week. It's a really great way of helping you remember what progress that you're making in your professional and career journeys, right? So it's a one-stop spot where you can put all this information. A resume or a CV, you only look at it sort of infrequently, you often use it to apply for a specific thing, but your LinkedIn profile exists 24/7 and it's sort of out there and you can sort of play around with that. So it's a great sort of area where you can store this information so that you don't forget it. But it's also important that you sort of remember that this information is there and visualize it sort of in real time and make sure that it's a key part of your own narrative, right? You're all so busy doing things, you're all making great progress. You don't want to forget what you've already done, and you want to make sure that everything that you've done, even if it's diverse and doesn't seem to fit together at first glance, is a key part of your narrative. And so making sure that you reflect on it and say, yes, I had those successes, I made that choice, and I made this progress. Those are important for your professional identity, also your wellness, right? To make sure you're celebrating the things that you're doing well. Obviously, LinkedIn is a networking platform. So if you're trying to find someone or people are trying to find you, it comes up very high in the search engine list of results that are out there. So your LinkedIn profile is also always going to be seen as one of the first things that are out there. And so you really want to use that as a way to ensure that people can find you and find what you've done, and for you to obviously find them, because part of your goal as you're sort of playing around with your networking is to find people who can help you answer questions that you have about whatever it is that you're doing. Success on campus as a student or a postdoc, or in your career next steps. And then when you are applying for jobs and putting yourself out there, people will find you and will be looking at your LinkedIn profile in a much more focused way, right? So this is a candidate who's applied for a job. I wonder what their LinkedIn profile says. I wonder what they say about themselves in their LinkedIn profile. That's going to be something that's going to be a key part of your application process, making sure that your messaging is aligned across your resume or your CV and your LinkedIn profile, and then making sure that you are connecting with employers in ways that demonstrates that you have a real interest in working with a certain type of employer, right? They can see that from your LinkedIn profile. From a first-gen perspective, people often talk about first-generation students lacking social capital. They don't necessarily have strong relationships with people in a broad range of industries, or who have gone through academia before and understand the sort of the hidden elements of that. And so obviously a network and building a network is a key part of addressing that and building your own social capital that's out there. Seeing how other people have done it, looking at the well-trodden career paths that are out there, and then taking on board some of that information so that you're integrating it into your own narrative. And so those are elements of that LinkedIn can help with. It doesn't address all these issues. And certainly, in terms of social capital, here's just sort of a broad description of what it is, the resources that individuals can access through networks, relationships, and connections, right? And the more of those that you have, the more that you have family members in finance and consulting and all these other things, the better understanding you'll have about it. And if you don't have anyone at this moment in time, then you do have to work a little harder to make those connections so that you can get up to speed on the information that's helpful to you. So you know best practices that are out there, so that you know how to position yourself and even when to look for jobs and what language to use as you're describing your skills. Those are all the things that you can build as you are building your own social capital. So that's why I sort of leave it there. And as I said, LinkedIn certainly doesn't address necessarily systemic barriers that might exist, but the networks that you have access to, the Penn network, the 190,000 Penn alumni and current students on LinkedIn, are part of how you build social capital as you're exploring careers that are out there. So that's the foundation of why LinkedIn can sort of be helpful as we're sort of going forward through this. I mentioned early on that the brand is a sort of a key part of what we're focusing on. And there's not really a definition of what a professional brand is, but here are 3 elements that I like to sort of connect with the concepts of brands. They are based on what you tell people, right? And so you have to remember that what you tell yourself inside with your inside voice and what you tell people on the outside are often very different, right? So you can be uncertain that you have the ability to do something and at the same time tell someone else that you're excited to do that thing and that you can do that thing, right? And that juxtaposition between your inner voice and your outer voice, it's all part of you, but what you want to tell people and what you want people to know about you is the sort of the confident version of you and your skills, right? So you have to sort of keep your inner voice and say, yeah, I understand you have concerns about this, but we're going to go forward anyway. So what you tell people is part of your brand. What you can show people is part of your brand. If you publish things, if you have a patent, if you have made progress in a project, if you are the leader of a student group and you've achieved a goal, those are all tangibles. And those are like objective evidence. People can see that evidence. And it's not just you saying, I can do these things. They can see that. So those are key parts of your brand. And then the last thing is what people think and say about you. Sometimes that's based entirely on what you tell them, right? You tell them this information about yourself and your skills and experience. They can tell that to other people. That is your brand. Sometimes people tell you things that you're like, oh, that's me. I didn't really think about that. But yes, that is a skill I have. And that's part of your brand. People telling you that you are a thing is part of the brand that you are because they see that, even though you may not see it as much. So all of these things work together and they're all sort of key to sort of integrate into your idea of what LinkedIn can sort of do for you. Your narrative is what sort of expands beyond just you, the individual. It's what, as I said, it's this brand element of what you're pointing to in terms of your publications or your presentations that are out there or what people are saying about you or how you're using your social networks to get that information out there. And then your brand is sort of a combination of all this, right? It's all of these things together that people can see. They can see you, they can see the information out there, and they make their own judgment about what that means about you. If you can be strategic about this, you can make sure that your brand aligns closely with what you want people to say about you. Obviously, first of all, you have to figure out what it is that you want people to say about you, but that's sort of the goal of this process. And LinkedIn is a way to help you do that. The other question to think about as you're sort of creating a LinkedIn sort of profile, who is your main audience right now? Because LinkedIn is viewable by everyone, it's not like a customized, tailored resume with specifically for one organization and one role in that organization. It sort of wants to be open and welcoming to everyone, but at the same time, you can still prioritize what audience that you would like to resonate the most with in terms of the information that you're sharing. And so, based on where you are right now, the audiences that you might be trying to engage with might be other students on campus that you might want to collaborate with, students on campus who might have information about navigating the academic world that you would like to have so that you can navigate that effectively too. You might want to connect more with faculty because you want to make sure that you're positioning yourself for future research or a future PhD or whatever that looks like, or you want faculty to be able to write strong letters of recommendation for you. Faculty are on LinkedIn. They use it just as effectively as anyone else, right? So that might be an audience too. For many of you, though, it's going to be the sort of the professionals and the alumni who are out there doing the type of job that you would love to do next, post-graduation or post-leaving Penn, and you just love to find out more information about the organization, about the role, about the skills that they're looking for. And so, doing informational interviews with people who are in those roles, or finding recruiters or finding hiring managers and connecting with them, or intersecting with them on LinkedIn, let's say, is a better one. And that may be your audience. And so as you begin to narrow down which career paths you're interested in, your focus on particular audiences might change, right? So it's a very iterative process. You don't have a LinkedIn profile and you keep it once and it's all done. You look for ways to change it on a regular basis. So here's an example of the LinkedIn alumni tool that's out there, where of the 195,000 alumni and current students, there's about 10,000 or so people that have the word data science in their profile, right? So for many people, that might be a job title or something that they've done as part of their degree, right? They may have a master's in data science. But this is a wonderful then resource of people that if you are interested in that role, you can begin to connect with or tap into in terms of finding answers to questions that you have about being a data scientist in the world that's out there. So just as an example, right? So there's, easily find Penn alumni in a data science role. Then I did a search just broadly, not for Penn alumni, just broadly on campus recruiters, right? They're all on LinkedIn too. That's sometimes how they source their populations, or they are engaging in their sort of recruitment activities and showcasing those on LinkedIn. but these are people across different types of fields whose job title includes campus recruiter. They certainly don't all recruit at Penn, but just as an example of who your audience might be as you are positioning yourself for a role that's out there. And then as a graduate student, your current brand or your current narrative sort of spins around these sort of three areas in different ways, right? So if you're a PhD or a postdoc, your research is sort of a big element of your brand. Your research skills are always going to be important there. And then you have your transferable skills. These are your collaboration skills, your leadership skills, your problem-solving skills, some of which are used in research, some of which are used beyond research. You are a member of a student group or a postdoc club or anything like that, where you've done other things that are professionally oriented and have those transferable skills. If you are a PhD student and a postdoc and you are aiming to, in addition to other paths, explore the faculty path, your narrative might encompass your research topic as a big part of that, because that's what you're really selling. If you're applying for a faculty role, especially, I can do good research and my research is important. Transferable skills like collaboration and communication aren't always valued in the same way for faculty job searches. Interesting. If you are looking for other jobs, consulting, policy, science writing, then as a graduate student, the transferable skills outside of your specific research topic, which may not be relevant to these roles, are going to be the things that you may want to highlight the most as part of your branding. These things ebb and flow depending on what your focus area is, depending on what you want to focus on, but they change over time. They're not static, but it's worth thinking about and sort of in your own mind, partitioning that you have these different elements of yourself that you can talk about in different ways. As I mentioned earlier on, I meet with students and appointments, and I often say, do you have a LinkedIn profile? And they're like, oh yeah, I created one when I was an undergraduate, but I need to update it, is usually what people say. If that's you in this case, then chances are your profile, as you describe yourself, might look a lot like this, right? Sort of a very generic statement that is auto-populated when LinkedIn sets up your profile, right? So you just might be a graduate student, no discipline, no topic area, right? In this case, not even a university, right? So some of these are not very descriptive, they're not very clear, they don't really give the reader a lot to go on. They're just sort of placeholders for things that you are doing, right? What we can sort of focus on today is shifting you towards a more dynamic version of yourself that might look a little bit more like this. And some of these are professionals and some of these are PhD students, but I found these for sort of poodling around on LinkedIn. And I think they're sort of good representations of the more dynamic version of how you can present yourself on LinkedIn, right? So a PhD researcher at Penn, data scientist, chemical engineer, a nice background that sort of jumps out, a professional photo. Jordan here with their Twitter handle there so that people can find them. But again, a lot of information that sort of speaks to what they're interested in and passionate about. And Jared sort of really owning his identity as he's working in the roles that he's in, right? So all of these are very confident statements about these people's brand and their identity and how they're leveraging LinkedIn to show that. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a little bit more sense of what that could look like for you. So we're going to run through then sort of the idea of creating a solid brand, and it's going to be sort of the nuts and bolts of what you can be doing on LinkedIn. Obviously starting off with a good solid photo, not shower squeegee version, or not this person who somehow managed to get their photo upside down, but a good solid photo. So these are the sort of the photos that I share that I say that, there may be improvements that you could do on these photos. And let me sort of run through and explain why. The first row here are all people, they're perfectly good photos, but they're all lacking that sort of direct eye contact. We're a very social species and people engage more with people when there's strong eye contact. And so, when people are looking over in different areas, they're like, well, what are they looking at over there? So my recommendation, good strong eye contact, a nice smile. It's very welcoming as a highly social species that we are. The second row here is all about the lighting, right? Lighting in the virtual space is like the equivalent of a strong handshake. Good lighting makes a good first impression. Sometimes it's too light, sometimes it's too dark. Easy to fix with a little bit of focusing on the photo that you're using. The third row is all about extra parts, extra body parts, extra bodies, right? So if you have to cut someone else out of your photo, it's not the right photo for LinkedIn. And so there are extra arms, creepy hands on your shoulders, and then a group photo that you just don't know who the person actually is, whose profile it is. And then obviously the last line is all about people who are missing body parts or missing parts of their body, right? And so again, trying to make sure that your photo fits nicely within the concept of the LinkedIn setup is going to be important. Now, from a graduate student perspective, a lot of the photos that I see in profiles are often points in time photos, right? Right now, you're a graduate student, and so you're in the lab, or you're presenting a poster, or you're walking around carrying your books, or whatever that is, right? And so these are all perfectly good photos, and they sort of represent the journey that you'll be on as you're creating your brand, but they fix you where you are right now as opposed to where you want to be moving forward, right? And so as you all move into, I really want to position myself for these types of roles, your photo wants to evolve to help people imagine you in those roles, right? So you sort of, as the old saying goes, you want to dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have. And so your photo wants to do that as well. And so if you're in the lab and you're doing stuff with solutions, but you actually want to be a consultant, then the lab coat and the lab setting might be a slight disconnect between how you're positioning yourself to be a management consulting working in business beyond the world of science, right? So certainly your photo should change over time, and it should not be the same photo over and over again. But think about positioning yourself as you get closer to your job search for, how do I want people to see me in the next role? And then make sure that your photo sort of connects with that. So in terms of just general suggestions, these are the types of photos that I think are so great, right? So great eye contact, strong smiles, a background that is interesting but not overwhelming, a little bit of greenery out there. So, the blossoms are coming out soon, although today's a terrible snowy day, so it's not a good day for photos. But these are all easily done with a smartphone with a blur background function to a certain extent, and a friend who's willing to stand there for 30 minutes taking pictures of you as you feel totally awkward. But one of those pictures over that 30 minutes will be exactly what you want. Now, just because you're professional doesn't mean you have to be boring. I have a PhD in animal behavior. I studied chickens. I don't actually have a chicken in my photo, but I could, because it's part of my narrative or my brand. These people are doing remarkably well at holding chickens and yet looking professional. I do not recommend chickens for other people who don't have a chicken background, but certainly you don't have to be, you can still be yourself as part of your identity here. And that's a very, very fluffy duck. Your face, your visual is important. Your name is equally important, right? So making sure that people know your name and know how to say your name and can associate your name with your publications and your portfolio and your projects. So here was a paper, I just did a random search for a paper on chickens, written by 4 authors here, whose names I would probably not pronounce correctly the first time I tried, right? I could try and I'd put, a French accent on it maybe, and maybe sound better, but probably not. So, these are obviously names that I should know in order to sort of connect with these people in my network, right? It'd be so great if I could say their name correctly and hear their name correctly and all these other things. So how can we do that? On the LinkedIn app, not on the desktop version right now, but on the LinkedIn app that you can download, you can record your own name and the pronunciation of the name and the way that you would like people to say your name, not the way that I would say your name, trying very hard to say your name correctly. You can record this on the LinkedIn app, and then it will be part of your LinkedIn profile on your mobile device, but also on the desktop, on the regular one, right? So record your name on the app, and then on your LinkedIn profile, you'll get the speaker icon next to your name. And if you click on that speaker icon, or click on mine, you'll hear me saying my name. And it's so important and so helpful for people to feel confident and comfortable saying your name and getting it right the first time. If I'm inviting someone in for an interview for a position in our office, and I can say their name and greet them correctly because they put their name up there, they're going to feel better. I'm going to feel better. The entire connection and interaction is going to feel better. And so I really recommend this, and do this if you think your name is simple or if you think your name is complex, right? Everyone should just do this as a way of making it easy for people. Pronouns, obviously LinkedIn now has a separate sort of part of the header there for pronouns. You don't have to just add it to the end of your name. So feel free to do that. You can do that both on the app and on the desktop sort of settings. And then your URL, right? The thing that takes you to your LinkedIn profile. Usually if you haven't changed it or haven't updated it, it's going to be the default setting, which is possibly your name and then a random bunch of letters and numbers that LinkedIn provides, right? And you don't want to be a random bunch of numbers and letters. You want to take ownership of your URL, right? And so you can certainly go into your profile and customize it based on what's available to you. Now, apparently there were other Joseph Barbers who just put Joseph Barber in, but I put Joseph Barber PhD. That actually worked for me because my PhD has been critical to every role that I've had, and it's a key part of my sort of brand identity, and it goes well with my chickens and all the other things that are out there. So Joseph Barber PhD seems to work well for me. Obviously, you can find your own version that's out there. So that's sort of the beginning parts of your profile. The next part that's going to be important is going to be the sort of the headline, right? The thing that comes after your name that really describes who you are or how you want to be described or how you want to come across or what your main themes are, right? So right now, my one is engaging communicator and creative leader with interdisciplinary expertise in career development and animal behavior. I like that juxtaposition between careers and animals. Doesn't make any sense but that's a lot of what my background is. It's like, it doesn't really make any sense, but it's interesting. Why engaging communicator? Because it feels very bold to say that. And it wouldn't necessarily be something that I would say just on my own, but I've presented for the Penn Alumni Career Tools webinar series. They have these great webinars throughout the semester. All of the stuff that they have is freely available to everyone. It's in their archives. And they do a great evaluation for the people who turn up to their webinars. And so I've given like 3 or 4. And the feedback that I get often feels and looks like this, right? And I share this not because I want to sort of say, people think I'm great, but because this helped me inform my brand identity. This helped me inform the themes that I have, right? So strangely, right, everyone sort of used this sort of same language. And so because people are saying that about me, I'm going to take ownership of that, right? I'm going to say, yes, that's great. People think that, so I'm going to think that. And not only am I going to think that, I'm going to say it, and it's going to be part of my brand. So that's how engaging communicator came up. I looked at what people said about me in these sort of evaluations, and I use that, because if they think that and they say that, then that's a key part of the brand. And so, that's where it lives right now. And again, this can change over time as you're thinking about different ways of positioning yourself for different roles that are out there. What do I see? As I sort of mentioned earlier, I see a lot of generic ones out there where people haven't yet identified their sort of takeaways or their themes. And then here are just the sort of examples of ones that I've seen that sort of, are a little bit more dynamic in terms of how people are positioning themselves. Data science turned software engineer, computer science educator, project director at Penn Biotech Group, right? So if that's sort of consulting where you're going, that's a great sort of headline that's out there. You can look at other people's, you can borrow their themes, you can see how they've done that, but a lot of it is self-driven by what you want to sort of come across in the way that you're presenting yourself. So it's a very iterative process. So we have a photo, we have our name and how to say it, we have our flavor, our headline, and then we have the about section. The about section is sort of that broad narrative that you can spin that helps you make sense, right? Because after the about section comes the experience section, and that's where you go into detail about the things that you've done. But before you drop people into, look at all the things I've done, you might want to give them an overview that they can sort of understand you better, that they can see why you do the things that you're doing, and they can see how those things fit together, because that's what you're telling them. You're saying, look, I've done all these things. This is the connection that makes these things make sense, right? So that about section, again, it's not the easiest thing to write, and it's not a thing that's static, but it really helps people understand who you are. In terms of best practices, I always recommend a first-person approach as opposed to a third-person approach. So don't say, Joseph Barber is an animal behaviorist, right? Because the question then becomes, who's your narrator, right? Who's saying this for you? Say I, this is you introducing yourself to someone. So keep it sort of I statements. Use language that sounds like you. Don't use language that's like a formal academic cover letter that sort of has a lot of thus and moreovers, right? Just use not casual language, but sort of informally professional language, right? Sort of make it sound like you. And then make sure that what you say in that summary is connected to your experience or your headline or other aspects of your profile, right? So you don't want to just say, I really enjoy leadership roles and then not have any evidence of leadership roles in the rest of the LinkedIn profile. So make sure everything connects together so people can see that. Here are some about sections that I sort of pulled from LinkedIn, from students. My thesis work focuses on, right? So this one takes you away from your own identity and puts it onto this sort of nebulous thesis. My thesis works. Whereas really you want to be the thing, the actor, the main, the main entity that you're talking about. You don't want to give your power to your thesis. In my thesis, I did this, as opposed to my thesis work focuses on, right? So you want to make sure that you are the main element talking about what you're doing. I am currently researching, so there's nothing wrong with that, but talking about what you have found and the impact of your research, that might be a more dynamic way of doing that. I'm a 5th year graduate student, so being a 5th year isn't any better than a 4th year or any worse than a 6th year, right? So the year itself gives a sense of where you are, but it's not your identity, right? You are more than just a certain year in your program. So think more about the themes. What type of student are you, as opposed to where are you in the process? This third one, I'm interested in pursuing research in developmental stem cell and regenerative biology, has a bit of a future focus to it. So that's nice, right? It's beginning to help people understand where you're going next. And if people can help with that, they might be able to do that. My current research focuses on, right? Research focusing on is a very common narrative when talking about people doing their work. It's very ill-defined, right? And focusing on something doesn't give a sense to the reader about what you've done or why you've done it or why that's important, right? So being a little bit more dynamic with that would be helpful. And then this last one has a nice combination of sort of past things that people are bringing into their experience and where they're going next. And so, short, sweet, but it covers a lot of ground in terms of helping people understand who this person is and what they do. Let's expand on this a little bit more with some pen profiles that I found. So again, the summary, the about section here is fairly broad. It focuses on skills. Skills in my project involve all these things. Keywords are how recruiters will find you, right? When recruiters are using LinkedIn on their own version of it, they are going to be looking for keywords for different things that are out there. So obviously, if you have those keywords as part of your work, those are good things to share. The blue words here, I enjoy research writing. I am eager to learn. These are emotionally positive words. They are energizing words. So try to make sure that your narrative is energizing by using strong words like this. And then just as a point of interest, the word things is a word that you should try to eliminate from any of your sort of professional writing. I was always taught that instead of using things, use the word that things represents. Here's some more energizing language. I'm fascinated, I love, I enjoy, I'm enthusiastic, right? So that's nice language that sort of creates this energy around what you're doing. You can go over the top, obviously, so don't do that, but just making sure that the energy that you bring to any experience comes to life is a key part of what you're trying to do here. Tiffany here is the great background, right? So the photo in the background helps people envision you, helps people sort of picture what you do and how you do it. It also has a very interesting, headline: Jack of all trades, master of city planning. So there's a lot that I could read into this profile, then say, well, what does that mean? Well, what else have you done? What's your background? So that's encouraging me to sort of read a little bit more into that. Lauren has done a good job here. First of all, identifying career goals. My career goals are to work in environmental planning, but also to keep people updated on their career progression by posting things. Today, I started my internship, right? So people can see how they're engaging in the field, and that gives people a sort of a sense of what's going on. Myron here shared their GitHub portfolio, right? So that information is available to people through their LinkedIn profile. So it's a multimedia approach to sharing that information that's out there. And so that's a really great way of making sure that it's not just what you say, but it's that evidence, the publications, the data that you've played around with that's important. Having a resume on a LinkedIn profile is okay. It certainly is another way of illustrating your strengths and your skills and your experiences. But because the resume really wants to be targeted to specific roles, I would tend to make in most cases, the LinkedIn profile stand for itself, and then think about using that resume more strategically. I think there's value in both. Certainly, I can get more from looking at a resume very quickly about someone's background. So it's not necessarily a negative, but because you may be applying for different roles and you want a resume to reflect that, just a sense to be thoughtful about whether you want to include that. And then publications, right? So advocating for yourself and your peers by highlighting publications that you've made and featuring those in posts, and then making sure that on your LinkedIn profile that you include those publications as well. That's going to be key. Now, here's a great sort of advocating for other people just by sort of giving them a proverbial boost, right? So let's break this open a little bit more. Miriam posted, Nicole then commented on this to say congratulations. A very easy thing to do on LinkedIn. The reason I flag it here is because Miriam posted the original thing, starting at GSK, but it's Nicole. When I'm looking at this, and I see Nicole posting at the top saying that she has commented on this, and I see the comment down below. So Nicole gets 2 mentions for Miriam's 1. So she's doing a good job of sort of connecting herself with someone who advocates for people and celebrates people's successes, but also connecting her with the concept of working at GSK, right? So maybe that's a thing that she wants to do as well. But so the idea is, being active and integrating the type of person that you are, someone who's supportive and someone who's celebratory for other people's successes. The things that you're doing on LinkedIn will illustrate those skills, right? And so that becomes part of your brand. If I see that you're someone who advocates for someone else, that's how I identify you in terms of your branding moving forward. And then, as I mentioned just earlier, publications are a key part. So in this about section, the student has their publications highlighted, summarized here. And then in the publications section in LinkedIn, they've listed those publications with a link directly to those publications, right? So if you want people to look at your research, then make it easy for them to get to that research. It's sort of the key takeaway from that. And then Jacob, sort of, I think our final example here, Jacob, a PhD candidate, a nice headline here that covers lots of things: the PhD, the educator, the academic and curatorial research, right? 3 elements of that, and helping people see that diversity of projects that they're on. And in their about section, they have sort of 2 main paragraphs. One is the broader perspective of the things that they've done outside of their research, and one is of their sort of their research, right? So they're keeping their options open by making sure that they're not saying in their profile they want to go into academia or they don't want to go into academia, but they're sort of saying, look, this is all part of my identity. I want to sort of shift now slightly towards that experience section, right? So this is Jacob's profile, and in his profile, he's done a great job of highlighting not just this research, because a PhD, a master's student, a postdoc, you're more than just your research, but all the other things that you've done, right? If I see the skills here, analyzed, conducted research, communicated, organized, managed, maintained, recruited, developed, right? There's lots of strong transferable skills here. So in terms of that those research skills and research topic and transferable skills, this experience right now is rich with those transferable skills and the research skills as well. So lots of great stuff here that Jacob did to sort of highlight his experience, which is better than some of the other versions I saw, right, where there's nothing, right? So the PhD candidate, 3 years, and there's no information at all to get the reader to sort of understand what you've done or how you've done it or what you've provided to that. So a little bit of information can be really helpful. Now, you can pull from a CV or a resume and just throw in those bullet points into the LinkedIn profile, right? There's nothing wrong with that. As people are looking at your LinkedIn profile, I don't think they really want to read a sort of a resume in most cases. They don't want to know that, you manage communication with collaborators, necessarily as a standalone bullet point. Whereas in a resume, you might want to include that because it's specific to a job role that you're applying to. So as you think about what your experience section should look like, some of the things that you might want to consider are, can you tell sort of almost mini stories about the things that you are most excited by so that other people can share in that excitement with you? So, as a TA, a teaching assistant, you're held office hours and provided feedback is a common thing that I see on academic CVs. Sometimes I see it on resumes. If you put that on your LinkedIn profile, it's like, oh, that's good. But if your actual experience was that you tried something new and it turned out really well and that made you more interested in something else, to me, that story covers the same information, includes some of the same keywords, but it's just more interesting for people who don't know you to read about this and learn a little bit more about you, right? So I feel like there's a way to sort of integrate more of, let's say, things from the cover letter approach in the experience section of the LinkedIn profile. I think you can try a diversity of things. I think sometimes a list of bullet points is fine. But if you really want people to engage with the projects and experiences that you are most excited by, then I think the brief paragraph might actually be better. And it's hard to format in a LinkedIn profile with bullet points. They don't really allow bullet points anyway. So the short paragraph might be a good approach to take. But I'm not committed to that myself. I think I like to try that out in different ways. In order to sort of come up with some of those either the bullet points or the stories that you want to tell, take advantage of our resume and cover letter resources that are out there, right? Because as you are identifying ways to position yourself in a resume, you will be creating language that is equally valuable in your LinkedIn profile. So these, again, are just two of the resources that we have. These are doctoral and PhD focused resources on the PhD career training platform. We also have the more broader for graduate students and postdocs, the creating effective narratives in your cover letter. Those narratives in a cover letter do work really well, I think, in the LinkedIn profile. So these are all videos that you can take a look at in your own time to explore this further. The final topic that I wanted to address was those recommendations on LinkedIn, because I think they're a very powerful tool. Maren Wood here is actually the founder of the Beyond Graduate School and PhD career training platforms that we subscribe to here at Penn so that you have access to that. This at one point was her headline and her about section. And she makes very strong statements here. I'm passionate, I'm funny, I'm encouraging, I'm committed to fairness and equity, I'm a problem solver, I like to empower people, right? So I sort of captured the main themes from this. Now you might say, well, that's very bold to say that. But if you explore her profile and you look at the recommendation section, where at this point she had 12 people recommending her, and I have subsequently recommended her too, because she does provide a lot of value to the work that we're doing. If you look at these mini recommendations that people have written, they all speak to those themes, right? Maren is supportive but honest. She's down to earth and encouraging. She helped me to have the confidence and be strategic. She's a strategic thinker and she's an empowerer. She gave me actionable advice, problem solving and empowering. Maren was a ton of fun to work with. So she's funny, right? So all of those themes are evident from those recommendations. And so they can all go back. Now, the question is, which one came first, right? Did Maren create those themes and then people agree with them as they're writing the recommendations? Or did people say those things in recommendations and then Maren integrated them into the narrative? It doesn't really matter. It works both ways. But here it's a sort of a watertight sort of circle, right? Watertight circle, I don't know what the analogy is there. But if I look at Marin's profile and she said these things, and then I see other people say that about her, I'm going to feel very confident that she actually has those elements there. So lots of great information about using those recommendations. And you can get those from a 360 perspective, from people who are above you, supervisors and advisors, from people that you work with, from people that you mentor or supervise in some fashion, from people that you've had internships with, right? So many people can speak to your skills and experiences, and obviously you want to do that too. You want to recommend them in the same way that they might recommend you. And in fact, if you recommend them first, they may be more likely to recommend you as well. I oversee Diane at Career Services. Diane wrote me a nice recommendation, innovative and creative. And so that creative element, again, is part of my profile, right? Something I like to lean into and want people to see. So happy for other people to say that too. Right, a few resources just to wrap up with for today. So on the PhD career training platform, there is a whole section on how to build your LinkedIn profile, right? So this is another video that you can take a look at to sort of walk through that step. Hopefully will align with what we've been talking about today. This is for PhDs and postdocs, or doctoral students and postdocs. Beyond Graduate School is our master's focused platform. They have a similar one that's focused on master students. If you go to LinkedIn Learning, which you will have access to, you can also learn how to make your LinkedIn profile better using LinkedIn Learning. It's sort of a bit meta in terms of how it's all coming from, but it's a really great set of resources there that you can play around with in terms of figuring out different strategies to do that. And then, as I said, the way to use LinkedIn for networking and how to leverage it and how to build connections and how to gain information, more about how to operationalize LinkedIn as part of your networking and operationalize MyPen as well. Let me leave you with some action items. Obviously, you don't have to do any of these, but the ones that I think, the first 5 are sort of very easy to do. Many of you will have done those already. The next ones I think are things to work on, but promoting your research, being active in posting things on LinkedIn is going to be important. Celebrating the successes of others, making sure that their research gets boosted and seen, making sure that you're celebrating the successes that they have, a really important thing to do for your brand as well. Multimedia approach, making sure that people can find your publications or your data or your projects or your presentations that you might have out there, a great thing to do. And then, think about who your audience is. You may not know yet, but over time you will, and make sure that that audience will gain the most from your LinkedIn profile without excluding other audiences that are out there. And then work on that experience section to tell those mini stories to make them more engaging.